Hello, guys. My name is Bianca, and I am a student at Jackson State University. I am studying social work in the graduate program. You're tuning in to view and listen to my research proposal. The professor in this class is Dr. Jago Lee. The title I chose for my research proposal is The Cycle of Child Abuse. And before I get into the background and introduction about the problem, my focus question was, are adults who were abused as children more likely to abuse their children than adults who weren't abused as children? I know it may sound kind of crazy, but it is a tongue twister. But that was my focus. And to give a little background about abuse, it comes in all forms, whether it's physical, sexual, emotional. It's always likely to have an effect on children and adults as they age. I was able to complete some research and find some articles, not very many pertaining to the question at focus, but I was able to find some articles that answered the question that I was focusing on. A lot of the research articles focus on just abused adults or what causes abuse and other questions, but like I said, I was able to find some to completely answer and validate my focus question. One of the articles that I found notated that adults who are not abused physically as children are likely to abuse children than the adults who were abused as children. In other words, it's saying that you don't have to be abused as a child to grow up and abuse your own children, because adults who were not abused as children can also abuse their children, as well as those who have been abused, and just completes the cycle or just continues the cycle. And as I kind of glide through my paper, I will pinpoint out some of the things that stuck out to me. And like going back to what I just said, the question can be answered both ways, because some children who experience abuse when they were younger, they grow up and abuse their children or neglect their children because that's all they know. And they don't stop the cycle because they know nothing else, and that's how they end up in foster care or being a repeat abuser. And you also have some that has been abused and does not abuse their children. They stop the cycle. So it's really two answers that can be validated for the question that I chose. And to answer my own question, I think, like I said, it can go both ways too. A brief statement of the problem, which I also said that earlier, that adults who are physically abused as children were no more likely to abuse their own children than the adults who were not abused as a child or not abused as period. And I work for an agency. I work for Child Protection Services, and I see a lot. And a lot of the things I see are not repeat offenders or repeat victims in the system. It comes from parents that, a lot of times it comes from a lot of parents that weren't abused as kids, and they are abusing their children. We very less likely see children or adults come back in the system that were abused as children and start to abuse their own children. I did see a few cases where the adults who were abused as children or in the system came and grew up and abused their own children, and now their children are in foster care. So, you can't really say, well, this person abused their children more than this person, because that's not true. let's see. Well, like I said, the cycle can be broken. Um, when revering the when reviewing the literature, I was able to, like I said, find some articles, and some of the articles that I found, I will give you the answers to the question that I first mentioned, and some of the answers that I found after reading some of the articles. One of the answers were many adult children of abusers continue to deal with ongoing abuse long after we have reached the level of maturity. So even if they're not abusing their children, they still can be abused by their spouses, whether it's emotional, physical, sexual, they still can get that abuse as they age out. It does not necessarily mean that they have to abuse their children. One of the others was contrary to conventional wisdom, adults who were physically abused as children were no more likely to abuse their own children than were other adults their age, or other adults that were growing up as children and were not abused. The same thing that I mentioned earlier. So you don't necessarily have to be an abused child to abuse your children. Another one was children of parents who were abused often abuse their children. So, like I said, I found evidence to back up my question. So, you have some that do abuse them and you have some that don't. This one states that children of parents who were abused often abuse their children. Adult children of abusive parents can only reference what they were taught and don't know to think any other way. Again, like I was saying, that means you're continuing that cycle because that's all you know. If you don't know anything but bad language, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, you're going to think that's okay to do your own children. Or if someone sexually abused your child, you would think that's okay because I was done that way as a child, so it won't hurt. The things that you kind of pick up or mimic as a child or went through as a child can follow you in adulthood. Everything their parents taught them, they teach their children. This can be a never-ending cycle. I answered to my question. Another one, child abusers often were abused as children. So and like I said, it goes both ways. When you are abused, you are somewhat likely to abuse your children. But when you're not abused, take that back. When you are abused, you are sometimes likely to abuse your children. And even if you are abused, you are sometimes likely not to abuse your children because you won't want your children going through the same things you have gone through, and vice versa. This is how I was taught, so I'm going to use this method with my other child. I got out of it. I think that child can get out of it too. So that's the kind of mentality parents have growing up. And there we go. Let's see. We went over the research question. And I also added some more research questions. Are adults who were abused as children more likely to abuse their children than adults who were not abused as children? Are adults who weren't abused as children more likely to abuse their children than adults who were abused as children? And lastly, are adults who were abused as children likely to be abused as adults? Remember, I kind of tapped on that in the beginning. My hypothesis is what I think, what I feel. It hasn't been validated. There's no evidence to my hypothesis. This is just my opinion. In other words, adults as abused as children will not abuse their children as they get older. That's what I think. I've seen it and I may not be right. Abused adults as children do not grow up to abuse their children. Non-abused adults are more likely to abuse their children more than previously abused adults. And like I said, that's my opinion. That's how I think. And a lot of people may not think like that. But like I said, working in the field that I work in, I've heard a lot. And it's a lot of times vice versa. It's the parents that hadn't been abused that end up abusing their children versus a parent that has been abused. Not saying that we don't have those repeat victims to come up and be the perpetrators like their parents were, but it happens. But this question that I wanted to focus on was very interesting because I wanted to research to see, how many people felt or how much valid information or valid research that I could obtain to answer that question, whether or not, children that were abused are likely to abuse their children versus the ones that weren't abused. And like I said, I really didn't I got two answers that say no and yes. So the same thing I was thinking, but I just wanted to validate the question that I always asked myself working in this field. My independent variable in this case is child abuse, because that's what I'm focusing on. That's the most independent variable throughout my paper. The dependent variable was the continuing cycle of child abuse, because we're also focusing on child abuse and if it continues as adults get older. The research that I used to complete this proposal, I used both qualitative and quantitative research. My sample and my data collection consisted of one of my co-workers that were able to answer the survey, the questionnaire that I had prepared, and also speaking with a few adults that I had known, some that who were abused and some who were not abused, to kind of also complete that questionnaire and to speak with me and hold conversations with me to gather information, which also was able to validate the question at focus. And a lot of their answers were no, I wasn't abused and I don't abuse my child, or a lot of them was I wasn't abused as a child and guess I may have slipped up and abused my child, or I was abused as a child and I wasn't going to put my child through the same things I went through. So I was able to validate that yes and that no answer for my question. And in a second, we're going to go over the questionnaire, but my research was quantitative and qualitative because I gathered all the information and I compared the answers. And so once I compared the answers, I was using numbers to compare how many said no and how many said yes. And I was using my conversations to gather information and all the information that I gathered with my participants. And I use that as far as my qualitative, gathering information and writing it in essay form or whatever it was, just summarizing whatever we was discussing. And it wasn't using numbers when I was doing my qualitative research. Like I said earlier, one of my limitations in this study was really finding articles that really focused on that topic, because it was a lot of them focusing on other things, but I was able to pull some and pull the answers that answered the question that was at my focus. At this time, of course, with doing the research, I did go over confidentiality with the participants. Everything we discussed, I expressed to them it will be confidential. I wouldn't give the information to anybody without their consent. I wouldn't use their names throughout my research proposal. They signed a consent form for my purposes, just to show that they were willing to complete the study. They knew that it was no cost, no fee for anything. It was willingly. If they didn't want to attend, then they didn't have to complete the process, but a lot of them were willing to, help me out. I am now going to interview my coworker and just ask her a few questions. I will not show her face in the video due to confidentiality reasons, and I will not say her name. So I will go over my questionnaire that I prepared. And it was only four questions on my questionnaire, and they were strongly agree, neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree. So as I ask these questions, you will hear her give me her feedback as far as the survey. Number one, being abused and or neglected as a child will have an effect on that individual as an adult. Do you strongly agree, feel neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree?
Strongly agree.
Okay. Abused adults will abuse their own children.
Disagree.
Okay. Adults who were neglected as children will neglect their own children.
Disagree.
A person who was involved with child protection services as a child will experience involvement with child protection services as an adult.
Neutral.
Well, this is my presentation, you guys. This is just a summary of the questionnaire and what I was able to go over with the participants and gathering information and allowing them to freely express themselves and complete this survey without me being judgmental, without me giving my opinions. I mean, I took what they said. We may have, after the questionnaire, that's when we went into our conversations about, what made them feel that way and how they feel about this, and that. But thank you all for tuning in. Bye-bye.